Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, where we bring awareness of sustainable health in the business hustle space. Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve success and optimal health. It's Friday, which means it's time for friends sharing facts about health, business, and overall success. In today's episode, we talk to Master Lama Rasaji. Today's guest is one of the only 12 Master Lamas in the world. He lived and trained in the original Tai Chi Gung Lamasery in Tibet. Master Rasaji has been trained in the Lao Tzu regeneration health system for more than 50 years and has been teaching it for over 40 years. This is a health system for longevity that has been passed down from teacher to student in an unbroken lineage for more than 3,000 years. He is the founder of Circle of Life and is helping his students overcome challenges and teaching them how to know and live abundant in all aspects of life: health, finance, relationships, and service to the world. Fun facts about Master Rasaji is that he's actually one of the 12 Masters Lamas in the world. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. And I just love being able to do this and share this with your audience. And anything I can do to help you, I'm excited about being on your show.
That's absolutely great. So what would be one of your hobbies? What's something that you absolutely love doing in your spare time?
That's funny because I was on a podcast earlier and they also asked me that very same thing. It's like probably surf fishing at the beach. Grew up as a teenager doing that and loved to be able to walk around, anything to do with the ocean. Definitely love to go for boat rides and intercoastal waterway. I think we're probably about 40 miles north of the oldest city in America, St. Augustine. And one of my favorite things to do is to get on a small boat and go down the intercoastal waterways to St. Augustine. They have some fabulous restaurants. And then every now and then I might throw a little fishing line on the side.
I love it.
So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite things to do.
To definitely be surrounded by water.
I love it. I love it.
Absolutely amazing. So look, before we get into today's deep topics and everything, I want the audience to understand where you've been, what your key turning points have been in your life, and what's led you to be here today. Are you able to update us on your life a little bit?
Okay. Well, it's kind of an interesting story. A lot of times people will ask me, why is spiritualization and health so important to you, Rasaji? And I said, well, they kind of go together because when I was an early child, I had bouts with respiratory issues, pneumonia, asthma, and I kind of outgrew the asthma. And when my family moved from rural Tennessee, that's where you hear the Southern twang, and we moved to Northeast Florida, the climate changed. And if you do a little research on Chinese Tibetan medicine, it'll tell you that environment, that normally your diet needs to change also. Well, I come from a Southern fried diet initially, and it was doing one thing in a drier climate in Nashville as opposed to Northeast Florida, where it's very humid. And so the progression of my illness moved from the lungs to the kidneys. And over a period of a couple of years, I got uric acid poisoning really bad, and it started to eat the inner walls of the kidneys. And so they tried all kind of treatments to do, and finally got to the point where they realized that certain valves between the kidneys and the urethra were not opening and closing and fully emptying out into the bladder. And so the toxins were all backing up in the kidney and began to eat the inner wall of the kidney, and probably lost, according to them, about a third of one kidney and almost a half of another kidney. Because your adrenal glands, as you know, sit on top of your kidneys, they were completely fried. So if I would have been easily diagnosed in the late 60s at about 12 years old with chronic fatigue syndrome, it would have been underestimated. I slept about 13 hours a day. I had little to no chi, no energy. So finally, they decided the only thing to do is they had to go in and fix the plumbing. So in the process of fixing the plumbing, today, if you're operating the kidneys, most of the time they go in through the back. And that day, they split me from hip bone to hip bone. And I make a joke a lot of times about the scene from The Wizard of Oz where the scarecrow is in the monkey scene and they have parts of him every which way because that's probably was me. Strange thing happened. This surgery was going to last about 4.5 hours. And as I early went under anesthesia, and with the mask on and the whole 9 yards, my conscious mind did not go to sleep. And as a matter of fact, I'll never forget, I'm falling back and I'm just this frail little kid and I'm really scared. I'm thinking they're going to start operating on me and I'm still totally aware. So about that moment, my spirit rose above the lamps over. I can remember going up first to the lamps, looking down, seeing people dressed in their garments. And then the next thing, I'm through the ceiling. And when I'm on the ceiling, I'm sitting in these clouds and I'm looking around and I realize I can walk in the clouds. This is really strange. And I'm walking around, trying to feel my way around. And the next thing I know, walking on this cloud toward me is this bald-headed little Asian man with a Fu Manchu. And he comes up to me and he says, "Don't worry about anything. Everything's going to be all right." And then the next thing I know, he's taking me to the Himalayas. I'm seeing the Lamasery years before I go there. I'm listening to what they're doing. They're outside picking herbs in the vegetable garden. They're doing practices, which were obviously Tai Chi and Qigong in nature. Another scene, I see them meditating together as a group, and he begins to talk to me. And all of a sudden, the next thing I know is we're taken back real fast into the hospital room, into the operating room. And I start hearing the pulse of the oxygen and the pump, 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 pump. And then they say, and then all of a sudden I see them freaking out, the doctors. And I heard them say, "We're losing him. We're losing him." And my body actually stopped to function. About that time, the Lama put his hand on my shoulder and says, "You need to go back now." And I looked at him and I said, now I was starting to be aware of my facilities. I looked at him, I said, "You must think that I'm crazy. I'm not going back in that body." And he goes, "You have to go back. You came here to do something." And I said, "Listen, I don't know where you come from, but where I come from, that body's been suffering for over 2 years." I said, "Sometimes I can't even stand to go to the restroom." And I said, "You're going to tell me that I'm going to climb in here when I'm here right now and I'm feeling no pain. I can go wherever I want to just by thought." And I was catching on really, really quick. And he said, "No, but you made a pact with the divine this time to do this." And lo and behold, it was really interesting. He said, "Look, you're only going to suffer a few more days and then things are going to get a lot better. I promise you." So he again put his hand on me. I felt this warmth, this shoot through my spirit. And something guided me to put my hand on my body. And I put my hand on the body. And the next thing I know, I hear them saying, "Hey, he's back. He's revived. He's revived." And the next thing I knew, I'm back in the body. And to say that was a turning point. That was a huge. I remember my mom several days later was telling me, she said, they lost you for a few minutes. And I said, "Really?" And I said, "Well, I could understand." I actually knew what was going on. She talked to me. And I was in the hospital probably about 15 days recuperating. And I guess on the 10th or 11th day, she looked at me one day and I was starting to obviously getting better. The surgery was a success with the plumbing. And I heard the doctor come to get them and they go to the next room. And I noticed that even though they were down the hall a little ways from me, I could hear their conversation like you and me talking. And I thought, how is that possible that I could hear? I did not realize that out of body experience had altered my hearing at the time and put me into what I call early Kundalini. And I did not know that at the time, but that all started right then. And that's why I was able to hear. And I heard the doctor tell me, listen, ma'am, the surgery was a success, but he lost so much of this kidney. He lost so much of this kidney. Remember, this was, before they were really doing kidney transplants, we're talking 68. And if they were available, they were really slim. And he goes, well, he'll be on medication his whole life. And he'll be in and out of here. And more than likely, I'm just going to tell you flat out, he'll be lucky if he ever sees his 18th birthday. Well, that was the year I graduated was 1974. And you know the rest part of that story. And so that surgeon passed away, by the way, about 15 years ago. I remember my mom, after she came in here, I sit up in the bed. I was finally feeling good enough to sit up. And I looked at her, I said, I heard what you said. And she pretended like she didn't know. And then I called her on it. And she goes, how in the world did you hear that? I said, I'm hearing a lot of things lately, Mom. She looked at me. She says, I don't know who you are, but you're not the same son that went under anesthesia just a few days ago. So that was the first big turning point in my life. There.
Wow. Even she could sense and knew that you were not the same person anymore in a way. That is insane. And that's definitely a turning point. Wow. The whole time you're saying that story, I was getting goosebumps all over my body. And I was like, wow, that's extraordinary. And you hear these stories and you hear parents, you hear kids or people say these stories and people are like, no, just go back to reality. That wasn't real. That's not something that you should know about. And then people go back into their old ways. And for you didn't. You excelled and you said, no, I'm listening to this and I'm going forth. So after that, how long did it take you to go to Tibet?
Well, what happened is back in the States, there were several magazines that people were turning to and look, that was during the time that, beginning to worship athletes and beginning to worship like movie stars was becoming real popular in America. Every woman wanted to buy a dress like Liz Taylor and everybody, wanted to look like Robert Redford and all that kind of stuff. So a very popular magazine at that time in America was called Life magazine. And pretty much everybody that read it thought, if it's in Life magazine, it's in print, it's got to be true, right? So my dad and my mom were very avid subscribers of Life magazine. And my dad, one Sunday, about 3 months after surgery, he reads this article that says, get your children into martial arts and yoga. It will build their stamina. So my dad then starts seeking around and he finds this martial art instructor that's actually a couple miles down from where we lived at the time. And so he takes me down there one day and he says, I don't know what I'm going to do with my son, but he's so frail. And he told him what happened to me. And so he said, the martial art instructor came out, had a jar about this big, and he had in it a root that was so big. And he said, this root's over 100 years old. And he says, I want your son to take the juice of this root and I want him to pour it in, about an ounce. Take this couple times a day. When the liquid is gone, then I want him to dry the root out, cut off little pieces of the root, chew it up in his mouth once or twice a day, get the juice, and then spit the root out, right? Well, that whole process took about 3 months. My dad, if you can imagine, 1968, he wanted $300 for this root, right? So inflate those dollars today, it'd be probably closer to about $3,000 today, right? My dad's hand was literally shaking, but he said, this is my son. So I did it. Well, it was remarkable. Years later, I discovered why it had the impact on me, because I'm sure a lot of people in your audience know, but caffeine can ignite the adrenalines, but over a period of time, it'll take them the other way if you drink too much, right? But ginseng is food for the whole endocrine gland system, and especially it's very powerful on a young male, very, very powerful. So it took me from 13 hours sleep to about 9 hours sleep. And it took me from doing martial arts half the time or half the class in a chair to I could fully participate. And all of that happened in a 3 month. My dad, literally thought it was a miracle. And what happened there is in his lobby, I noticed he had health magazines. And in the health magazines, they were stamped by a health food store that was not closed away. So I got my bicycle and I started showing up. And next thing you know, I'm taking my little motorcycle and I'm showing up. Never forget, I drive in one day, I'm about 15 years old, 3 hours after surgery. You can't even tell I've ever been sick. I walk in one day and I come up to this counter and I got my organic peanut butter and more organic bread and sprouts and everything. And so I'm collecting this. And the whole time I'm in there, the lady, the owner, she's watching me and she's studying me. I said, I think this lady thinks I'm going to steal something from her store, right? So I finally get up there and I drop it on the counter just to wake her up, right? And I said, ma'am, is there a problem? She said, no, there's not a problem at all. I said, really? I said, you look shocked. She goes, I'm shocked. I said, why? Nobody under 30 years old's ever been in my health food store before. And again, it was another sign that I was on course and I was a pioneer and I was trending in a direction that not many people went. It was another sign of that. And I continue to get stronger. I got my first black belt, then I got my second degree. I was working on my third degree. And I was actually performing. One day I went to a celebration and out in Seattle, Washington. And I had just creatively designed a martial art dance to some music, to some original music. And so I'm out in Seattle at this festival, and I'm only just getting ready to turn 17 years old. And this professional dancer comes up to me and says, have you ever taken dancing before? And I said, no. He says, so he jumps on the plane and it just happened to be that he was going back where I was going back. So now we spend 5 hours on a plane. Spirit's setting me up again, and Spirit's going, you got to talk to this guy. And the guy says, man, we need dancers like you. And I said, look, you're not going to get me in tights. There's just no way you're going to get this country boy in tights. And then he told me, he said, yeah, but there's some real pretty ballerinas. You don't know how good of a deal it is. So the idea of meeting some pretty ballerinas kind of got me kind of excited, right? I rethought about the tight issue, And so I went back and started dancing. And because of movement experience with martial arts, 4 or 5 years under my belt, I always loved music. I was listening to music since I was a little kid. So I started taking this dance. 18 months later, I'm dancing off Broadway in New York City.
Wow.
And it was there. We used to have a vigilante group, and that vigilante group was called the Guardian Angels. Anybody that does some research or Google this group back in the 70s. And it was about 1975. I had graduated high school, and I was, when I wasn't rehearsing or dance training, on the weekends, I was in Chinatown taking different kung fu classes, different martial art classes. And one of my sparring partners walked with the Guardian Angels, and they actually supported the New York City police. And so they had walkie-talkies in those days. And if they saw a gang fight going on in a gym, they would contact and say, y'all need to come here quick before this thing gets out of hand. So I would walk his beat with him maybe a couple times a week. So it was a Thursday afternoon. He says, I got to tell you something. So I said, what? He said, there is this Master Lama in Washington Square in Soho in New York. He said he's teaching an art called Tai Chi Gung. Well, I'd been taking some Chinese version of Tai Chi, but I never heard of a Tibetan system of Tai Chi. And he goes, according to this Lama, real Tai Chi comes from Tibet, not from China. And I said, what is he talking about? So he said, look, the serious people come on Saturday morning. I said, man, I'm not working this weekend. I'm going to say, listen, you want to come meet this guy? I said, okay, all right. So Saturday morning, I show up, and there's only about maybe 18 people there. And about half of them are sitting on one side, half on the other. He's sitting down. His back's to me. Now, you got to understand, I'm a guy that's now 18 years old that just 6 years ago died on the operating table. I'm working on my second black belt. I've been to tournaments. I'm dancing for you. You know, my stuff doesn't stink. I mean, my male ego is like, you know what I'm saying? Out the thigh.
Through the roof.
Cocky. Oh my gosh, you couldn't. So, and I'm about 5 or 6% body fat, and literally I could kick at 6 o'clock. So I could take your head off with one kick in a matter of seconds, right? So, you know, I'm thinking, all right, who is this guy supposed to be? You know, so walking up real cocky. And then I look at this guy closely, and I see these people, their mouths are like, you know, like he was hypnotizing them, listening to every word he said. And then I look around him and I said, there are pigeons and there are literally a couple squirrels walking around this guy's lap. And of course, that bothered me. But then my rational macho mind said, oh, he's got bird seed or something. And okay, so I walk around to the front. The next vision bothers me even more because I walk around and he ain't got nothing in his head. And they are like little children right there. And then I see these human beings again. They're like somebody drugged them or something. And I said, what the heck is going on here? I almost turned and walked away. And then he cleared his voice. He got up. It was almost as if he levitated. He just literally floated to his feet with a body control level I had never, ever experienced. And then he walks toward me. He's walking toward me. I mean, literally, it's like he's got no gravity. He comes up. He doesn't grab my hand. He grabs the inside of my forearm, and then he pulls me toward him like that. He looks in my eyes, and he goes, Rasaji, what took you so long? And I went, what? And part of me goes, what's this Rasaji stuff? And then my soul, though, says, wait a minute. I know this name, right? I find out later in Sanskrit, Rasaji means God's joy. And it was like I knew it. And he looked at me. And that's how I met the Lama. That's how that part started.
Wow. And throughout all of it, even though, like you said, you know, you were that young 18-year-old, ego and everything, you still trusted. You still trusted throughout all of that. And Spirit still brought you to these people, to these scenarios that you're just kind of meant to go. And I guess it happens to a lot of people where they go, oh, I just landed there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like we know. And it's, the old saying, when the student's ready, the master appears, right? I think it was 6 months later that this third major thing that happened in my life. It was interesting that all three of these things involved the same individual, because we were there. I had, because of the surgery, getting out of my body was not hard, because if I felt any discomfort, if I pulled a muscle, most people would go, get a Tylenol or whatever. No, not the llama, not the baby llama. I would just get out of my body. And I got used to flying around. And for the longest time, I thought all spirituality mean how much you could get out of your body. But about 6 months into that, again on a Saturday, I come there and he said, I'm going to teach you something really special. He'd been teasing me all week long. Okay, so I knew all about bilocation, but I was getting ready to have a tri-location experience that it was going to baffle even my capacity to think. And there were going to be witnesses, which makes this whole thing another level of doozy, right? So we're in the process. We've done our Qigong, kind of warmed up, and now we're doing our Tai Chi form. And in our form, it's a very short form, only about 30, 40 movements. And we make a couple 180-degree turns. And so I go to make my 180-degree turn, and I look over, and he's standing right where I am. And I go here, and I look at him, and it's not 1975, 76 New York anymore. It's some other time. And the trees and the buildings of New York City skyscraper is not behind him anymore. I'm seeing like Chinese pagodas. And he's no longer got the same clothes on. He had some real beautiful Chinese garment, like you would imagine an emperor of some time ago wearing, right? And all of a sudden, I got hit with another advanced dose of Kundalini. And I'd been going through Kundalini ever since my out of the body experience. And now we're talking about a 6-year progression where I was passing out from time to time and everything. And all of a sudden, I was losing consciousness. And as I started to feel myself slipping and falling, somebody caught me here, and one of the other students caught me here. And they kind of lowered me to the ground. And I was like half in, half out. But I could still hear them. Again, the super hearing, I could still hear them. And they were talking to Bo Yang, the Master Lama. They go, Master Lama, what's happening to Rasaji? And they go, oh, he's awakening and remembering who he is and what he came to do. And for the first time, I got shown. They've been telling me since out of the body 6 years before that I came to do something. And I'd just been going through the motions and following whatever spirit wanted me to do. But I didn't have a clue what this really was, right? Now I'm going to be shown, and I'm going to have a wake-up call that, anyhow. I remember I had a vision of my Cherokee Indian friend from South Georgia. Beautiful healer, beautiful soul, Jimmy. And I'm thinking about him, and I say, I can see Jimmy. Of course, now I'm there. Part of me's there. And remember, there's, about a dozen people that are witness plus the master. So remember this. This is the real important part, right? So, but I'm walking down a beach in St. Simons, Georgia. And I didn't know at the time, but my buddy Jimmy was leading a vision quest for Native American Indians, right? And the funny thing was he comes walking up to me, and I come walking up to him. We embrace. So obviously I'm enough that he can feel me. I can feel him. And then this was the age of the Polaroid camera, where you would pop it, and then out of the mouth of the camera would be an instant photo, right? Well, till this day, he still has that photo in his bedroom, proving the miracle of spirit, that I materialized enough to actually show up on film. And that was so now that should have been enough. And remember here, somebody had to take the photo, and there were a half a dozen people here, and now there's the people in New York. But that's only a bi-location experience. All of a sudden, I was aware that I'm back in the Lamasery. And remember, still to this day, that was the second time I'm in the, but I physically have not yet been there. So I'm there, and they're going, oh, there's little Lama Rasaji. And I hear this word, little Lama, for the first time. Oh, there's little Lama Rasaji, and he's finally showing up over here. It's great to see you, Rasaji. And there's witnesses there too. So I'm in 3 locations partially. There are physical witnesses of 6 or more people in all 3 locations. And then finally, I'm back. All of this transpires in about a 40 to 45 minute time frame. Seems forever for me, but on third dimension, it's about 40, 45 minutes. And so finally, they help me up, and they give me some ginseng, pop drink, and I'm waking it up. And I leave, and of course, I messed up silly for days, right? My conscious mind is trying to conceive how this is even possible, much less anything else, right? And of course, part of me is thinking, well, maybe the guy drugged me or, whatever. And, my macho mind still didn't want to let the reality of third dimension go totally, right? Even though I've been going in and out of 4th and 5D for a while, I didn't want to do it. So I thought, you know what, maybe I don't need to go there anymore, right? And then part of me then came to the realization, hey, if anybody's going to be able to explain to you what's going on, it's definitely going to be this guy. Well, it was also at that time, so that what really hit me was that this was the same being that I first met out of the body 6 years before. So I had to now deal with all of this new reality, right? How am I going to deal with this reality? I thought I was a boy going to have a normal life, right? I said, what is going on, right? So this went on, and we got real close. I mean, he became like this spiritual father that I never had. And so about 2 years later, he comes to me and he says, I got good news, I got bad news. And he says, what you want first? I said, well, I'm born the Chinese sign of the monkey, and the monkey's used to adversity. Lord knows my whole life already been adverse, right? So I said, give me the bad news first, right? He says, well, my visa's about expired and I got to go back to Tibet. And I said, okay. I said, that's not good news. He said, but the good news is I want you, and he picked out 2 other Americans. I want you guys to come and train at the Lamasery. I said, you're kidding. Really? Man, I was happy as a Cheshire cat. I was just like, all right, went home. I said, I got to go home. I got to talk to the family. I hadn't been home in about 6 or 8 months anyhow. And I said, I got to go home. So he was going to be there 3 or 4 months. So I went home for about 6, 8 weeks. My dad gave me some extra work. I could make a little extra coin, save up some money. And my dad, he was so funny. Bless his heart. He just always shaking his head about his son. And he says, where you going to this Tibet place? I said, Dad, it's not Tibet, it's Tibet. And he says, what are you going to do? It snows there all the time. And I said, Dad, I'm going to go study with this thing. I had turned down a dance scholarship, fully scholarship to one college. And I came out as a swimmer, and a guy still wanted to give me a swimming scholarship at another college. My dad totally thought I had just lost my bananas, right? You're going, God knows where. I said, Dad, I'm going. If I don't like it, Dad, you know how strong I am. I said, I'll come home. No problem. So that's how we prepared to go to Tibet. Yeah.
What an
Pretty funny.
experience. And I can just imagine your dad, because like you said, at that time, they were looking up to athletes, they were looking up to actors, idolizing the word that you used. So then it's kind of like, well, you could be this and you're going to somewhere where you have no idea where you're going, just to do what, you know? Wow, wow, wow. Bless your soul. That's absolutely amazing. An amazing story. And good on you for trusting the whole time. And I think trust, I think that's a big one at the moment. I think a lot of people are losing trust. And some people are given these opportunities like you are, where, spirit comes and guides us to where we, should be in a way. But, we turn the other way.
Sure.
Why is that happening? Why are we losing trust?
That's right. Because back just to my story up until that time, that took me till, about 19 years old. And it's very, at any one of those times, I could have turned around and said, no, or not, but yeah. And I guess I started realizing that that's the way that spirit does with us and speaks to us. They bring people in our life, messengers in our life. I mean, I like everybody else, this 50-year journey has been a lot of times messengers that brought me one door and then they were gone. And I mean, and you knew you were supposed to walk through that door. And I know sometimes I would be shocked. I would say, they open the door. So I think it's human tendency. We get attached to things and people very easily that, you expect they're going to open the door. They're going to come in with you and they're going to stay a while with you, and not the very fact that they were there just to open the door. And I think that was, and I got used to the modus operandi of spirit is don't judge spirit at all. That if people have to understand, they probably all the time want to know, how did I trust so much? You can understand, when you spend 6 out of the first 12 years of your life and all the outside authorities you're exposed to don't have the answer and you're suffering, you have to go inside. I would realize today that I was going inside even before I ever went out of the body. I was meditating before I even knew what meditation was, because I was going inside. And I remember first year in Tibet, I was asking the Lama, I was getting ready, 19 going on 20. It's actually finishing my first year. So it'd been my 4th year of training, but my first year. I was asking about 2 things. I said, I got to know about self-defense from my martial art point of view. But from my spiritual point of view, I got to know about meditation. He said, well, you're going to find out about meditation pretty soon. But he says, you're not even intermediately meditating, Rasaji, until you can hear the blood flow coming out of your heart. I said, what? He said, until you can be still enough to hear the blood flow of your heart, you're only halfway to where I want to take you in meditation. I said, what? So that was one thing. The other thing I said, well, what about martial arts? And I recounted his in my second meeting in Seoul and how I felt and all my martial art training. And so he gave me a demonstration. And the first thing he said, well, the best self-defense is don't be there. He says it's all a conscious experience. As you become more conscious, he says, just like Jesse James would never sit with his back to the door. He said, you don't be there. And I recounted incidences. Living in Manhattan in the 70s was a trick itself. And for a young man to stay out of trouble and not get hurt or robbed or mobbed or whatever, it was a big deal in those days. And I said, okay. And I kind of got it. He said, but let me tell you something. He said, when you got off that plane in Delhi and then you left Delhi and you trucked up through Northeast India and then you went into Nepal and then you guys came on up through Nepal to southern Tibet. I said, you know what I'm talking about? And he said, yeah. I said, I knew where you were every moment of the day. And at any time, I could have stopped you. Heck, I could have kept you from getting off that plane if I wanted to. And then I thought, oh my God, what kind of power does this guy have? And what kind of self-defense is this? I said, I already had a couple black belts, right? But I said, this is I said, okay. And I think it was a motivational talk for what was coming next. And that was, he was going to walk me up on a mountain and leave me in this mud hut attached to a mountain for about 45 days without even telling me he was going to leave me. And then I had to be in a state that I wouldn't go crazy because, for 45 days, I didn't see another human. The only Lama I saw were a couple of four-legged Lamas at the time. No two-legged Lamas, right? And I remember about the 20th day there, I was like, well, I thought the number one fear was dying. I said, but I'm pretty okay now with my own death because Lord knows I've died before, I'm back. I know for sure that spirit survives the body because I've been there. And I said, okay, it's not, I said, maybe it's public speaking because I still hate public speaking. About 30 days into that time, real soul searching time, I kind of realized that the fear of most humans in the world is living a life absent of fear. And that the only way to embrace an abundant life, like what Christ talked about, right? To embrace this abundant life, is you can't embrace that abundant life if, number one, you can't release your fear and embrace your peace. Tai Chi Gung actually means the same thing that the mantra Om Shanti means, which is give power to peace. And I thought to myself, if you can't embrace your peace, you'll never overcome real fear. If you ever overcome real fear, become peaceful enough and overcome real fear, then you will live a life absence of fear, which will naturally lead you into the abundant life. It was funny in scriptures, a lot of people miss this, but in scripture where Christ is getting into all the promises, things of immortal glory and abundance, and he's given us all these promises. The first thing he says, in order to have the fertile ground to receive the promises, you have to be in a state of shalom, a state of peace. And I look at myself, I said, goodness gracious, Tai Chi Gung, Tai Chi Gung is a 3,000-year-old system, master to student in an unbroken line. And it makes sense because I remember my second year of training, I said, well, how long am I going to practice this Tai Chi Gung? And he says, you're going to keep practicing your Tai Chi Gung until you can be totally peaceful and you can love unconditionally everything in creation 24/7. He says, until then, you practice your Tai Chi Gung. So I'm still working on that. I've been doing practice about 52 years now, and I've been sharing it 40 years. I've slowed down a little bit, but I'm still working on it. I tell people, they say, what kind of Lama are you, Rasaji? I said, well, think about Forrest Gump goes Lama, and you probably got a good idea what kind of Lama I am.
I love it. The one thing that you said, fear. That word, fear and peace, right? I mean, all around the world, everything that's happening at the moment, everywhere, and we can all relate to it because it's happening everywhere, is fear, right?
Oh, yeah.
Drilled into us individuals, scarcity, not feeling abundant, no peace. So then, people listen to this podcast and they're like, so you're telling me to be peaceful? How am I supposed to be peaceful when everyone around me is fear this, fear that talk, this talk?
Right. The key of it is you're right on target. And I do a little inspiration message we call the Daily Lama. Anybody that joins Rasaji.com gets the free email every morning with a little video, a little inspiration. Comes out 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they can download my first book for free called, just like this site, The Circle of Life. And I did just 2 days ago, Don't Choose Fear. And I told people, I said, see, there are so many people in the world that don't have a lot of people's best interests at heart. And unfortunately, a lot of those people run the major medias in the world, and not so much all the time the people that broadcast. I think a lot of times they're probably as much a victim as other people. It's the corporate heads that have an agenda to push, that they're kind of a puppet. And sometimes you can tell they're like lifeless. They have like no energy in them, and they're just doing the words. Unfortunately, most humans are still at the point in their life where they're not even where I was when I was a teenager, starting to turn inward. It's almost like everything that's happened. See, what we were told in Tibet was the more unconscious you are or people are, the more contrast it takes to wake them up. So what's happened is what we call the El Kabong technique. It's where you got slapped across the face. It's where you put the cat's nose in the litter box and says, this is where you do your business, right? This has been done to humanity in the last 18 to 24 months. And it's a big wake-up call, but they have to turn in, which means they have to take mentally responsibility to turn certain things off. I'll give you a good example of a demonstration of that. So I told you about the meditation and about listening to it. I was probably middle 20s. Then all of a sudden, one day I had that experience. And I literally was so deep inside myself that when I heard the blood flow, it was like a beautiful waterfall. Beautiful waterfall. I'm thinking to myself, I'm always wanting to go to the waterfall or the beach or something. And I realized the waterfall is right inside of me, right? I just didn't go deep enough, like the Lama said, right? I thought, wow, that's beautiful. I was home after the Tibet journey, back in New York, 22, almost 23 years old, and thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to teach Tai Chi Gung? Because I was now trained as an adept, and I could teach privately, whatever. I was certified by the Lamas. So I could do anything I want. But I thought, well, show business is not over for me yet. I know that. So I'm going to try to find a way to balance the two. And that was my next stage. Then all of a sudden, it was way before internet and everything. And this is like 82, 83. And I get one of those Western Units telegraph message, comes from the Lamasery. Well, my mentor had just been promoted to head Lama, Maha Lama, which was a big privilege for him, but also for me because he was my master. So for him to receive that honor was and then as always, we give homework. So, I got homework. By the way, you thought you left the Lamasery and you thought homework was over, right? Let me tell you. So this was his preaching to me. It was, hey, Lama. Hey, little Lama. He says, I want you to go to Broadway and 42nd Street every Friday from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which he knew that I knew that's when we changed from the yang solar energy of the day to the lunar yin energy of the day. That's that transition, right? He says, I want you to sit at the busiest intersection in the world by far. Hundreds of thousands of people in those 2 hours on a Friday, will walk, and they are selling their wares and everything you can imagine, and things we can't even say on the tube, right? And I want you to hear your blood flow there, like you did on the mountaintop. Oh my God. Well, first of all, I realized, it took me almost 21 years to prepare for an experience that had to happen in the most conducive situation, right? Opposite of contrast. And now he was going to put me in an experience that the original master, Boganathar, when he left China, and he said, I'm going to take my Tai Chi Gung to a different level. When I was in China, he said, I understood the cycles of nature: fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, the circle of life. And beautiful, people can imagine China 3,000 years ago, how clean the rivers must have been, how pure the forest was. You could pick fruit right off the tree and eat it. Just imagine the vitality minus any industry at all. So he said he had regenerated his whole body. He was well over 100 years old when he went to Tibet. And they said he meditated for decades. And then after he meditated, he said, I'm going to create balance of nature like I experienced in China, in the Himalayas where there is no balance. I'm going to take the 8 months of winter here, and I'm going to create the 4 cycles of nature inside me. I'm going to take Tai Chi Gung to a whole new level. Well, see, that's what they were asking me to do. They were asking me to duplicate on a brick, that there was always this little brick reef that I could go sit down, and it was perfectly for me to be able to keep my back straight. And I would cross my fingers and close my eyes. Oh my God, and hear all kind of nonsense. And this went on for months. And I got about 4 months into this. I never missed a Friday. I never missed it. That Maha Lama asked me to do something, but you better believe I did it. And about 5 months into it, I started shifting my mind. And I said, you're doing this all wrong, Rasaji. You have to recreate the experience inside you that you experienced on the mountaintop in Tibet. So I sit down. It took me about 3 more times. And on the 3rd time, I was hearing everything that I normally held. And then I went inside, and I could feel, just like that day I fell in Washington Square and they caught me. I could feel myself going through a tunnel and a vortex inside of myself. And I could hear the people outside getting almost like somebody was slowly turning the volume down or changing the channel on a radio down, right? Like FM. And all of a sudden, I hear whoosh. And all of a sudden, I started hearing that waterfall again. And I got to tell you, I was smiling. I was so happy in myself. There's old saying, in my soul, I am free. In my soul, I am free. And I knew it. I said, this is freedom. It's not about principality. It's not about politicians. It's not about how much money that you can make or not make. It's about total freedom. And freedom comes from us getting in touch with what we call in Sanskrit our soul, which is sharat. And I said, I'm here. And after that, life started becoming a breeze. Now spirit would do its tricks to me, but I would pay attention and I would catch it. I'd go, oh, spirit, you're up to your little game again, aren't you? You're trying to move the llama right here. I know it. And it's learned me to wait on it when I need to wait on it. Sometimes it pushes you to act a little bit more than you want to. But remember, if you're trusting spirit and you're not, like we talked about, listening to the fear, the little voice, right? And where does really fear come from? And it comes from people who don't feel connected to the divine. It's my first chapter of my book. I said, you could get rid of all the therapists and psychologists in the world that work with people on depressed if you could teach the most basic person how connected they are to the divine. Because when you examine why is a person connected, it's usually three reasons. Number one, they either don't believe in divine order or divine power at all, or they believe in that, but feels like God dropped them off at the bus station. Or the third one is that you and me somehow have more privilege to connect to the divine, so our life is okay, and they don't have that privilege because God's not showing them favor. You take one of those three reasons, and the moment that a person overcomes one or all three of those, there's nothing left for them to be depressed about. How can you be depressed if you know that the divine lives in you? Lamas teach the divine not only lives in us, he looks through our eyes, he hears through, he breathes our breath. You know, he walks our walks. Everything we do is so connected to the divine. It's like meditation waiting to happen. That's the advanced form of meditation. When you realize one day that everything you do or you do not do is meditation. That's the word.
I love
That's
that.
the Tao.
That's absolutely amazing. And I think at the moment you're talking about, fear, you're talking about abundance, you're talking about going in within, connecting. That's absolutely amazing. But the thing is, a lot of people are probably like, well, how can I connect? I feel so disconnected. And you even hear people say, I feel so disconnected from my body. Right. And maybe that's a good thing, but maybe it's not. And I guess, with everything that's been happening, the lockdowns and everything.
Sure.
I think, and I go, wow, is that a sign from spirit for us to actually go within because we have nothing else to do, or we shouldn't be doing anything?
Bingo. See, that's the blessing, in my opinion, that you nailed it. That's about this. And again, remember what I said about contrast, right? So people are kind of, you hear people the last 2 years on YouTube and everywhere, talk about the Great Awakening. Lamasery laughs about that. Lamasery's been waiting for the Great Awakening for 3,000 years, right? So we get it. But what is correct is because of what we just talked about and what you just said. People are now almost forcing themselves, kicking themselves in the hiney that I need to do something different than I've done before. And the moment that you trust, here's the thing that people need, I hope they get out of this, and that is, guys, God is always as close to you as your heartbeat and as near to you as your breath. And he is never far away from you. And you don't have to be religious to turn to him. But what you do need to do is you need to trust in him and turn to him and show him. See, people talk a lot about tithing, and it's important to give a percentage of what you earn. It's spiritual law to something that you value. In other words, what you value. In other words, if you had the time to do it yourself and the financing, you would put your heart, soul, mind back. That's what you need to give to, right? Don't give to anything less than that, and know exactly what they're doing from beginning to end. A lot of scams out there, but that's important to the divine. But you know what's 10 times more important than the divine? Your time with him. You want to show him you love him? Then devote time, because he measures that so much higher than coin. I said, because money we can always get back. That last 5 minutes, you can't never get that back. So he values that more. And the way you want to show him you love him is like we show any other person we love them, is we want to spend unadulterated time. You know, I'm also blessed to be a father of 3 sons. I have a wonderful wife, and I have now a grandchild. And they know that when they're with me, this disappears. My laptop goes down. They know that I am worthy of the precious time. If we're not willing to do that with our loved ones that are still in the flesh, how are we going to do that with a God that's beyond the flesh? You know, how are we going to do it? So it's all about edification and respect of all life, but I'm going to respect all life, and I'm not going to respect the source of all life. Come on. I've got to do that. So after the Lama gets up and does his restroom business, the first hour of my day is tithing to him by showing him, by giving my time, that I am thankful he's going to give me another day. And that if I'm humble, you know, in our order, prayer means to ask, meditation means to listen, and contemplation means to become. And if I listen, he's going to tell me exactly what he wants me to do that day. I don't need to know any more than that. I just need to know what he wants me to do today, because today is going to be the day I live. I'm not worried about tomorrow. I'm going to live today. He's in the presence. We need to get used to being with him and being present also, especially in our human relationships.
I like that you said we've got to get used to being present and giving our time, because that's a perfect opportunity that we have now to do that, to, you know, to let go of fear, be in peace. And going back to what you said, that allows us to live that abundant life. So for anyone who wants that abundant life, we actually need to go back within and remember.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's been wonderful being with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
And your absolutely amazing knowledge and talking to us.
Well,
I really appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
Good. We'll have to come back. Maybe some of your people, or you might have questions that you might want, and maybe in a couple of weeks we can get together and do this again.
That sounds like an absolutely amazing idea. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My honor. You take care, and God bless to you and all your audience. Good night.
The content and information provided here is opinion of Mahela Raguse and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mahela Raguse does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. And in the circumstances shall the Natural Podcast, Mahela Raguse, any guests or contributors to the Natural Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mahela Raguse be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mahela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in the educational content.